Prologue, Threads of Fate. The world was unraveling. From the depths of the abyss to the towering spires of forgotten gods, the fabric of existence frayed at the edges. In the heart of the ruins of Xarn, beneath layers of broken stone and cursed history, something ancient stirred, a force neither dead nor fully alive. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, gods ascend and be slain, and now, as time itself wavered, it whispered once more. The whispers echoed through the halls of the Temple of Whispers, where fate itself was spun into threads of destiny. Within its core, cradled in a living web that pulsed with memories of all that was and all that could be, Morgael, the spider of knowledge, waited. She had seen the fall of Ilion, the treachery of Asmar, the looming inferno of the Phoenix. Every question came with a price, and every answer carried a burden. Far from the temple, in the towering metropolis that stood as the last bastion of order, another kind of war was being fought. Sebastian Valcrest, president of Metropolis X, knew the world was collapsing. But he would not let it take his city. He had gambled with devils, made pacts with the Forsaken, all to hold back the tide of oblivion for one more day. And yet, the storm was coming. Whether through fire or through silence, the world would burn. Chapter 1, The Weaver of Secrets. Deep beneath the ruins of Xarn, a procession of dark-robed figures moved through the mist. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the ground trembling beneath their steps. These were the Umbra Magi, seekers of the forbidden, disciples of the shadowed path. They had come for the truth, knowing it would cost them dearly. The chamber opened before them, vast and endless, walls draped in a web that was neither silk nor flesh, but something in between. It pulsed as if alive, whispering stories of those who had come before. In the center, her body part woman, part arachnid, sat Morgael. Her eyes, dozens of them, each seeing a different thread of fate, fixed on the Magi. Her voice, a chorus of time-displaced echoes, filled the chamber. You seek knowledge of the Rebirth Gate. You wish to hear of Ilior Vael'Tharyne. A shiver passed through the Magi. None had spoken of their purpose aloud. One among them, cloaked in violet sigils, stepped forward. We offer blood for answers. Morgael's many eyes blinked in unison. Her claws traced the web, strands shifting to reveal glimpses of possible futures, each one more terrible than the last. If Ilior opens the gate, the Phoenix shall rise. The world will burn, cinders carried on winds of sorrow. The Magi stood silent. If Ilior fails, time itself will collapse, devoured by the Aeon that sleeps beneath all things. One of the Magi gasped. There must be another way. Morgael's laughter was like wind through bone. The web does not lie. Choose your ruin. But among them was another seeker, Nakal, his mind tormented by a single question. Who is Thomas? He whispered. Morgael tilted her head, her claws weaving his past into the threads of fate. Shadows twisted, taking form. A figure emerged, Thomas, bound in strings, a puppet of Asmar. Nakal's heart turned to ice. No one left the Temple of Whispers unchanged. And not all who entered ever left at all. Chapter 2, The Last Bastion. Metropolis X stood on the edge of oblivion. Sebastian Valcrest knew this. From the high towers of his citadel, he gazed upon the city that had survived where all others had fallen. But survival was no victory, it was a postponement of the inevitable. He adjusted the cuff of his tailored jacket, the sigil of Metropolis X gleaming on his ring. The illusion of control was all that kept the people from panic. Yet he alone knew the truth. The old gods were dead or dying, the world unraveling thread by thread. The time of diplomacy had passed. A knock at his chamber door. A hooded figure entered, a messenger of the Coven of Veils, bearers of forgotten truths. They are moving, the messenger said. The Magi have descended into the ruins of Xarn. They seek the spider. Sebastian exhaled, his mind already weaving strategies. Then we are out of time. There were only two choices left. Bow before the fire, or make a deal with the dark. And Sebastian Valcrest had never been one to kneel. Chapter 3, The Puppet's Gambit. The sky above Metropolis X had begun to bleed. Sebastian Valcrest stood at the edge of his obsidian balcony, watching crimson hues seep through the clouds like wounds in the heavens. The air tasted of iron and ash, a portent, he knew, of the phoenix's hunger. The Coven of Veils had warned him of this. The first embers of rebirth were already kindling in the dark. Bow before the fire, or make a deal with the dark. His jaw tightened. The Coven's messenger lingered in his chambers, a silhouette of tattered robes and hollow eyes. The Veil Warden demands an audience, the figure hissed. She awaits you in the shattered cathedral. Sebastian's ring glinted as he gripped the balcony rail. The shattered cathedral, a relic of the gods' war, where the boundaries between realms were thin. To meet there was to dance on the edge of a blade. But desperation had long since stripped him of caution. Tell her I'll come, he said. But if this is another of her riddles, I'll feed her heart to the hounds of Xarn. Far from the city's spires, the Umbra Magi emerged from the ruins, their robes stained with the temple's ichor. Nakal lingered at the rear, his hands trembling. Morgael's visions clung to him like cobwebs. Thomas. Asmer's puppet. The Magi's leader, cloaked in violet, turned to the group. We return to Ilior. The gate must be opened. The Phoenix's fire is preferable to the Aeon's void. Murmurs of dissent rippled. A younger magus, her face scarred by shadow, spat, "You'd burn us all to cinders?" There's another path, Nakal's puppet. If Asmer controls Thomas, perhaps we can turn the strings against him. Nakal's breath hitched. The others turned to him, their gazes sharp. Speak, demanded the leader. I don't know where Thomas is, Nakal admitted. But Morgael showed me a citadel, half drowned in black waters. Asmer's stronghold. If we find him. If is a thread too fragile to hang the world upon, the leader snapped. We proceed to Ilior. Now. As the Magi trudged onward, Nakal hesitated. Then, silently, he slipped into the mist, his path diverging toward the drowned citadel of his vision. The shattered cathedral loomed, its fractured arches clawing at the sky. Sebastian stepped through its broken gates, the air humming with fractured magic. The Veil Warden stood at the altar, her form shifting between woman and wraith. You reek of fear, Valcrest, she said, her voice a chorus of whispers. The Phoenix comes. Even your city's walls cannot withstand a god's rebirth. Sebastian ignored the taunt. What do you want in exchange? Her smile split like a crack in glass. A thread of your fate. One decision, yet unmade. He froze. The Coven trafficked in paradoxes, a bargain could unravel his past as easily as his future. But Metropolis X was all that mattered. Done. The Veil Warden extended a hand, a needle of bone glinting in her palm. Then bleed for me, President. As the needle pierced his wrist, the cathedral's shadows erupted. Visions assailed him, a boy with empty eyes, strings of shadow coiling from his fingers, Thomas. A gate of liquid flame. And Morgael, her web shuddering as if in warning. The puppet holds the blade, the Veil Warden murmured. Cut his strings, and the gate may yet close. But hurry. Asmer's teeth are at your throat. In the drowned citadel, Thomas knelt, his hands submerged in a pool of ink-black water. Asmer's voice slithered through his mind, cold and familiar. Soon, little puppet. Soon you will open the door, and I will remake this rotten world. Thomas's reflection stared back, a hollow face, eyes sewn shut with spectral thread. But deep within, a spark flickered. A memory, a name, Nakal, and a woman's laughter from a life before strings. His fingers twitched. The water rippled. Somewhere, far away, a spider in a web of fate paused, her many eyes narrowing. The puppet had begun to wake. Chapter 4, The Drowned Citadel. The black waters of Asmer's stronghold swallowed sound, leaving only the hollow drip of decay. Nakal waded through the flooded halls, the air thick with the stench of rust and salt. Shadows writhed on the walls, their shapes too deliberate to be mere trickery of the light. He gripped the dagger at his belt, a relic etched with anti-pact runes, and pressed deeper. Morgael's vision had not prepared him for the wrongness of this place. The water clung to his legs like hands. The ceiling wept oily droplets that hissed where they fell. And somewhere in the labyrinth, Thomas waited, a pawn in a game older than empires. A flicker of movement. Nakal froze. Ahead, a figure knelt in the water, shoulders hunched, head bowed. Strings of shadow coiled around his wrists, anchoring him to the depths. Thomas. Nakal approached, his voice low. I know you can hear me. The spider showed me your strings. Let me cut them. Thomas did not turn. Asmar listens, he whispered. Every word. Every thought. Then think louder, Nakal hissed. He lunged, dagger raised, but the water erupted. Tendrils of darkness lashed upward, snaring his arms. The blade clattered to the stones as Asmar's laughter echoed through the chamber. Foolish little magus. Did you think to steal my puppet? The shadows coalesced into a figure, Asmar, his form a shifting void studded with ember-like eyes. The water boiled around him. Nakal struggled, but the tendrils tightened, their grip freezing his veins. Thomas stood slowly, his sewn-shut eyelids twitching. I remember, he murmured. A village. Cherry blossoms. A name, Lyra. Asmar's snarl shook the citadel. Silence. The strings around Thomas flared crimson, but he staggered forward, hands outstretched. You took her. You took everything. For a heartbeat, the tendrils loosened. Nakal seized the dagger and slashed. The runes blazed as the blade severed one of Thomas's bonds. A shriek tore through the air, Asmar's or the citadel's, Nakal couldn't tell, and the chamber trembled. Run! Thomas roared, his voice finally his own. The two men fled as the walls collapsed behind them, Asmar's wrath flooding the corridors like a tidal wave of ink. Chapter 5: The Fractured Web. Sebastian found them at the edge of the drowned citadel's ruins. Thomas knelt in the mud, gasping, the remnants of Asmar's strings hanging from his wrists like dead serpents. Nakal stood guard, dagger trembling in his grip. You, Sebastian said coldly, his coven-forged revolver leveled at Thomas. You're the key to the gate. Thomas met his gaze. And you're the fool who bargained with the Veil Warden. How much of your fate did you trade, President? Sebastian's finger tightened on the trigger, but the ground heaved. The sky split, revealing a molten tear where the phoenix's wings brushed the horizon. In the distance, Metropolis X's shields flickered, strained to their limits. Nakal stepped between them. Kill him, and the Aeon devours time. Let him live, and the phoenix burns the world. We need a third path. There is none, Sebastian growled. But high in the Temple of Whispers, Morgael stirred. Her claws plucked a thread from her web, Sebastian's thread, glistening with the coven's tampering, and wove it into Thomas's frayed destiny. The spider's voice slithered into all their minds at once, a venomous symphony. Bring the puppet to the rebirth gate. Let him stand between fire and void, and cut. Thomas clutched his head. She wants me to become the blade. To sever the threads of both gods. Sebastian's laugh was hollow. You'll die. Yes, Thomas said softly. But I should have died years ago, with Lyra. The group turned as the citadel's ruins erupted. Asmar rose, a maelstrom of teeth and shadow, the phoenix's light scorching the sky behind him. Time itself seemed to fray, the Aeon's tendrils gnawing at the edges of reality. Nakal gripped Thomas's shoulder. How do we reach the gate? Thomas pointed to the horizon, where the earth cracked open, revealing a spire of liquid flame. Ilior is already here. As they ran, Sebastian's ring burned, the Veil Warden's price seeping into his bones. He wondered which would kill him first, his pact, the phoenix, or the spider's gamble. Above them all, Morgael's web shuddered, its threads bleeding silver.